Could you imagine being ripped from your home at the age of 5, then shipped across the country, and forced to live in a cramped boarding school where your culture, language, and family were forcibly taken away from you? For thousands of Native American children, this was the truth. This is the story of the Indian boarding schools that used to plague the U.S. The first school was a one-room schoolhouse in Genoa, Nebraska, on a Native American reservation. What started as a small building would expand to cover over 640 acres and enroll over 4,000 students, representing 40 different Native nations. By the 20th century, around 78% of Native American children were forced from their families and sent to these schools. Many children being as young as 5, they were taken to live away from their families with the goal of killing the Indian to save the man. This meant breaking their connections to culture, language, and tradition. The schools were a mix of education and labor. Half the day was spent in classrooms where children were taught in English, typically learning a boring and narrow curriculum. The other half being spent laboring for the schools or nearby non-native families. The conditions were very poor. These children had to suffer overcrowded, poorly built buildings with little food. Diseases would spread quickly in these tight spaces, and death rates were disturbingly high. Many children endured harsh punishments for the slightest problems. These schools were rooted in racism. Some families would apply to have their children attend, usually because they've been fed misinformation about what the schools were really like. Another major reason was because of their financial situation. Whenever they filled out these applications, they would have to specify what tribe the parents were from, as well as the percentage of native blood they had. Though some students found new opportunities, the majority faced lots of physical and emotional trauma. Children were punished for speaking their native languages, forced to practice Christianity, and disconnected from their families. The scars of these schools still show today, as most Native American families across the U.S. have had at least one relative attend one of these schools. In Genoa, Nebraska, the Genoa U.S. Indian School Foundation has done tons of work to preserve the history and impact that these schools had, as a way to honor and remember the children who suffered and survived. Canada and Australia would often send Indigenous children to schools like these. They have both since issued formal apologies and made reparations. Canada even held a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to address the deep scars that these schools have left behind. As we take a look at this history, we must remember that this was not just about forced education. It was about an attempt to erase an entire people's identity, to suppress their culture and beliefs. It's a very painful part of our history that has had a long-lasting impact on Native communities today.